soy intérprete. Soy intérprete y estoy aquí con mi cointérprete Liliana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liliana, and I am an interpreter and communication partner here with my co-interpreter, Andrea.
La justicia lingüística es muy importante, incluye el compromiso de asegurarnos de que se puedan escuchar todas las voces.
So language justice includes a commitment to making sure that all our voices are heard.
Hoy este evento se llevará a cabo en español y en inglés. En un momento le explicaremos cómo puede elegir un canal para participar en su idioma preferido.
And today's event will be in English and Spanish, and momentarily we will give you a guide as to how to use the interpreting function here on Zoom.
Utilizaremos la función de interpretación de Zoom. Si utiliza una computadora, verá un globo terráqueo en la parte inferior de la pantalla, pero ojo, todavía no activamos la interpretación, así que le avisaremos exactamente cuándo. Por ahora solo ponga atención. Si utiliza una tableta o teléfono, deberá pulsar en más o more, a veces 3 puntitos en la pantalla. Verá un menú que incluye la opción de interpretación de idiomas. Para escuchar la interpretación, deberá pulsar en el icono del globo terráqueo o interpretación de idiomas. Deberá elegir su canal de idioma y si está en un teléfono o tableta, no olvide hacer clic en listo o done.
So today we'll be using the interpreting feature here on Zoom. If you're on your computer, you'll see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen, but please note that we have not yet activated the interpreting feature. So you will see it momentarily. If you are on your tablet or on your phone, click on the 3 dots or more, and you'll see a menu that pops up that will include an option called language interpretation. To listen to the interpreting, then you'll click on the globe icon or language interpretation. Please choose your language channel. And if you're on your phone or tablet, then click done.
Todas las personas deben estar en un canal de idioma. Aún si entiende todos los idiomas hablados, escoja un idioma para escuchar la conferencia.
So we ask that everyone please select the language channel, even if you speak both languages.
Bien, entonces ahora, anfitrión Onaisa, can we please activate Liliana as an interpreter? Bien, great. So now everyone should be able to see the globe at the bottom of your screen. So go ahead and choose your language. You should be able to hear Liliana speaking in Spanish. Si están en inglés, si hacen su selección de idioma como inglés, entonces deberían de poder estar escuchando a Liliana hablar en inglés. Si es así, pueden darme unos pulgares arriba en su pantalla. Bien, veo a varios funcionando. Entonces, Onaisa, ¿puedes, por favor, activarme a mí como intérprete? Please go ahead and activate me as an interpreter. And you're welcome to carry on your meeting by listening.
Great. Thank you so much, Liliana and Andrea. This is so exciting, again, just to see everybody. Thank you so much, everybody, for making time for this really important conversation. My name is Irene Sue. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I work for Smart Justice California. And then I want to make sure Onaisa has a chance to introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Onaisa Kazi. We truly appreciate you being here, and we realize that this time is time you could be spending with your family and your loved ones. Yeah, we're just excited to get started. So I just wanted to give a huge thanks to our interpreters for, walking us all through the steps. And yeah, if you have any questions or any technical issues, please feel free to use the chat box and reach out to either me or Irene. And we want to give a special thanks to our host, Justice for Trinity, Menlo Together, Smart Justice California, and many, many co-sponsors. You can see the slide for the full list. If you haven't already done so, please use the chat to introduce yourself and your names, your pronouns, and your county.
Great, thank you. Let's see. So yeah, just quickly to talk a little bit about what we're all here today to talk about. Today is exactly 1 year away from the 2022 DA elections, in which 56 counties in California will elect their next district attorney. That means millions of voters are going to be casting their ballots for the most powerful elected office in the criminal legal system. There's a lot of confusion, though, about what DAs do, and many don't even realize that DAs are elected officials. And so that's kind of, the reason why we're bringing everyone here together today to talk a little bit about why these elections are so important. Some of you have been part of, the reform movement for decades, and absolutely know a lot of this stuff already. And some of you are just getting started. Really, we're hoping that this conversation will be helpful for everybody. And certainly, if you've been doing this work a long time, please feel free to share your wisdom and advice and experiences with others during this event. This is your first time, obviously. We're so thrilled that you're here, and just hope that you find this event a useful one.
Yeah, so our hope is that after this event, that everyone here will feel empowered as ambassadors in your community, in your region, to help educate and inspire other people to join, this movement for transformative justice. And so since it's going to be kind of impossible to cover the scope of all of that in 90 minutes, everyone who's registered for this will get an email. We all love emails, and it'll have a lot of information that'll be really helpful that you can pass on to other people as well. Another way to stay up to date on next year's DA elections is to sign up for the ACLU's Meet Your DA newsletter, and we'll send a link, but it's meetyourda.org. I did start recording the event earlier, so just to make sure that everyone is aware that it is being recorded. And kind of a quick note that this is not a pro or anti-DA event. It's just an event to hold all DAs accountable and make sure that they're serving their communities. So it's going to be a nonpartisan discussion, and the goal of this evening is to not, support a specific candidate.
Terrific, yes. And so for a quick preview of the program today, unfortunately, Abella Okobi, who we were really looking forward to hearing from, last minute isn't able to make it. She's dealing with some health and work issues. And so we are very fortunate, though, to have Kate Amo-Godfrey here to speak for Justice for Chenadu. And we may be joined a little bit later by Adante Pointer, who is one of the attorneys who served on the team on the Chenadu Okobi case. After we hear from them, we'll hear from Fabiola, who's going to lead us in acknowledgements to make sure that we take some time to talk about and think about all the folks who can't be here with us today. And then following that, we're going to be hearing from Yoel at ACLU. He's going to be doing an overview of prosecutors and sort of Prosecutors 101, just to get everybody sort of on the same page. And then we have a wonderful panel here today with Vonya Corals, Jared Rivera, Sarah Lee, and James King. That panel will be moderated by Ann Irwin. We'll also hear after the panel, we'll hear from Ariana Vargas, who has written a very powerful poem about her friend Sean Monterosa. We'll then have some time in breakout sessions to talk to folks in your region about ways to plug in locally into this work. Based on the counties that you indicated on your registration form, we have pre-assigned you to different breakout groups based, again, on your responses, but you can switch back and forth to a different breakout group if you desire. And after that, we'll just have some very quick closing remarks, and we'll have some specific ideas on, again, how you can plug in and stay engaged. And so with that, maybe I'll take it back to you, Onaiza, to talk about community agreement.
Thank you, Irene. Sorry, struggling to find the unmute button. Yeah, so I'm just going to quickly go over some community agreements for this event, just to make sure we're creating a good space for everybody here. So many people are directly impacted, and we want to respect their stories and experiences and elevate them. So just keep that in mind. Another thing that I think is really important is to seek, intentional learning. We're not perfect, we won't be, but if we can strive to learn, I think that's important. Take care of yourself. Reach out to me if you need anything. You can private message me through the chat. Expect that we will have unfinished business, and hopefully that follow-up email will help with some of that. And if we do see anything that's kind of a breach of these agreements, we'll probably kind of reach out, talk through it a little bit. But we might, if we do need to remove people, we will, just to keep the event going. And yeah, so one thing you'll all notice is that you can't unmute yourselves right now. This is just to make sure that we can have those breakout rooms and have people get, accustomed to or get involved with people locally. So just, yeah, if you have any questions about that or the breakout rooms, please send us a message. All right.
Wonderful, thank you. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Fabiola, are you available?
Thank you, Irene and Aniza. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for being here. My name is Fabiola. I'm a Redwood City resident, and I'm here today to hold space and say the names of some of the people taken from us by police violence locally. For me, I like to start off and share the name of my cousin, Irvin Mendez. Also, the names of Demetra Stanley, David Tovar, Anthony Nunez, Shinadu Okobi, Oscar Grant, Yanira Serrano Garcia, Roger Allen, Kyle Hart, Sean Monterosa. And these are just a small number of names. Unfortunately, there are more. So if there is someone you know who has been harmed by police violence, if someone who is incarcerated, or if you're thinking of someone today who can't be with us and has been directly impacted by the criminal legal system, please feel free to use the chat room to share their name and allow us to acknowledge them here. We will hold 30 seconds of silence to honor their names. Okay, I see Martin Ordóñez, Sandra Harmon. All right, thank you everyone who shared a name in the chat, and to everyone for participating in the 30 seconds of silence honoring them in this space. Once again, thank you.
Thank you, Fabiola. If we could spotlight Kate next.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Kate Amu-Gottfried. I'm a friend of Abella Okobi's. I am a full-time mom and a part-time volunteer community organizer with Justice for Chinadu. I formerly lived on the coast side in Half Moon Bay and now reside in Redwood City, all within San Mateo County. So as Irene shared earlier, Abella is extremely under the weather and dealing with the potential of the shutdown of Twitter in Nigeria and all of the policy implications. So she could not be with us tonight. So my remarks have come together very last minute. And to be quite honest, for the first time in a while, I've been really overcome and really emotional sharing Abella's words and sharing the story of her brother. So tonight you get my raw thoughts and some hard lessons I've learned alongside Abella in the past 3 years. A moment about Abella. I was prepared to introduce tonight, but she's the public policy director for Africa, the Middle East, and Turkey at Facebook, where she leads on engaging with government, civil society, and other policy influencers. She shapes Facebook's legal and policy agenda on issues related to privacy, free expression, and access. Prior to Facebook, Abella was the founding global head and senior legal director for human rights at Yahoo, as well as a corporate lawyer at Davis, Polk, and Wardwell in New York City. She holds a law degree from Columbia University. I encourage anyone to Google her, to read her own words in many press statements and many public speeches. I share the background of Abella because many victims of police violence do not have an Abella in their corner. They do not have access to communications and policy directors or the ability to speak directly to influencers or journalists at The Atlantic, The New York Times, The Washington Post, or USA Today. Despite all of that skill, organizing capability, access, and privilege, there are still many folks across the US, in California, even in San Mateo County, that do not know about the murder of her brother, Chinedu Okobi, by 6 San Mateo County Sheriff's employees in October of 2018. Getting press attention and capturing the attention of news media can be a challenge. So for each story you hear about, I'd like everyone to think about the many, many more that there are. And for each district attorney or law enforcement press release that you do read, I'd like everyone to recall, if you've seen it, the initial press release of George Floyd versus the video that you saw with your own eyes about what actually happened. I've shared the story of Chinedu's murder many, many times in many different forums. I've shared Abella's words and my own, and most of the time I share strategy, where and how to show up, and generally all of this in a pretty calm demeanor. I haven't let my own grief escape or really shared a lot of that publicly. But tonight, after a year and a half of a global pandemic, there are many, many more families, perhaps your own, that have been directly impacted by grief. It's been at our doorsteps and maybe much closer and more visceral for each of you here tonight. We need to hold those emotions close. And we do that as we engage in all of this advocacy. At the heart of all of that work are human lives, lives that were deeply loved and cared for. And whether their heart still beats in a state penitentiary, a county jail, an ICE office, or whether they've been stolen forever, each of those souls were loved and are loved. Abella often quotes Bryan Stevenson of the Equal Justice Initiative, who reminds each of us to get proximate to the pain and the suffering in the communities in which we work and advocate. Through this work, I've hugged and held many families of victims of police violence, specifically within San Mateo County and the broader Bay Area. And each recounting of their deaths is so painful and is a powerful reminder of the senseless violence at the hands of our state. Each story reminds us that none of these deaths, none of them are isolated incidents. Each is directly connected to patterns and practices of over-policing, racial profiling, and rapidly escalating uses of force. So I want to share just a few of my own personal lessons learned as very much a newcomer to the work of criminal justice reform. So first, as this group tonight is very motivated and extremely well-informed, I ask each of you to remember and to get proximate to the pain. and to those details of all of the names shared by Fabiola and others on this call. I keep thinking about building knowledge of our systems. I've been drinking from a fire hose for the last 3 years, and in order to understand how it works, what are the mechanics? And mostly I've learned there's just so much more that I don't know. But I want to name just a couple of specifics for things for us to think about as we move forward. So how does 911 dispatch work in your area? What are your local police practices and policies? What does your local use of force ladder look like? What is a use of force ladder? I didn't know that. What are the relationships between your city councils, city managers, mayors, municipal police departments? I've learned a lot in the last few months about those relationships, who's supporting who, and how those dynamics work. Also compare that against the role of the sheriff's office, an entirely different law enforcement entity, and the sheriff as an elected official as opposed to a chief of police. I've learned significant differences. Learn about our mental health responses at a local level, and more broadly, the relationships between for-profit prisons, state penal systems, county jails, and the state and county mental and behavioral health systems. There's a lot to learn. And I list these things not to bring us to collective exhaustion and overwhelm, but as many parts of a very complex puzzle. In order to change the system, in order to be a good advocate or a strong community organizer, we cannot simply shoot from the hip. We need both an understanding of the levers of power in order to build an informed strategy, and we need to build public knowledge and understanding about the mechanics of these systems and the many cracks within it. I've also learned that fortunately, the broad space of criminal justice reform is getting a lot more attention, thank goodness, but it's also getting a lot more noisy. So although I personally subscribe to abolitionist and defunding strategies, we still need and depend on all of the folks talking about reform and vice versa. We need each other to continue to move what is possible and build the political will to make these different visions and changes of the system a reality. We also need to continually bring more folks into the movement and continually ask each person to level up. So we meet them where they are and then bring them to the next level of detail. So everyone on this call needs to keep networking, keep building, and trying our hardest not to reinvent the wheel. There are so many mentors and so many that have gone before. Which leads me to the notion that this is a marathon and not a sprint. We build capacity, we build people because we need support. We need breaks and the ability to both step up and take steps back to recharge. And I say that all because it's deeply personal. My husband, Kofi, looks a lot like Chinadu. He's a dark-skinned Black man. He's 6'2" and 280 pounds. As I said, we live in the same county where Chinadu was murdered. I also have 2 young Black sons. So while we get proximate to this pain, there's also a daily toll and stress of basic safety, particularly for Black men and for those that love them.
Y para aquellos que aman.
Close is motivating to keep going, to keep finding the next strategy, even when substantive change feels slow or fleeting. There's also a mental health cost, and regular breaks and a community of support is critical. Abella and I bonded initially as the parents of Black sons and all that implies, particularly while raising them in the US. I've learned so much from Abella in the past 3 years on parenting, leadership, organizing, and perseverance in the wake of trauma and tragedy. So through a multiple of those press interviews, speeches, and her own writing, Abella has gifted all of us with a lot of insights. But 2 quotes in particular I hold on to as constant reminders and anchors for me while doing this work. And the first is that tyranny ends where accountability begins. And secondly, power gives up nothing without a fight. So thank you all on this call for leading and engaging in this fight for change across California. And thank you each for your solidarity. I think we have Adante Pointer next, if I saw him pop up. Adante, are you there?
I am. Hello, everyone. Greetings. My name is Adante Pointer. Wow, I'm an attorney, civil rights attorney. I have been litigating cases for 16 years, primarily in the Bay Area, particularly in Oakland, but all across the state of California. And having given a number of closing arguments and a lot of speeches, that was a very powerful speech to come after. Thank you very much, Kate, for your words and your insight and inspiration. Thank you all for having me here tonight. I'm a pinch hitter of sorts, but so I hope to fulfill the void and also to impart some words of wisdom and insight as well, where I stand in the fight for justice. As I mentioned, civil rights attorney, and I've helped a lot of families, but in particular right now, I am one of the attorneys who is representing and civilly prosecuting the death of Chinedu Okobi. As you all know, Chinedu lost his life in a needless and easily preventable situation wherein a number of San Mateo County Sheriff's deputies essentially went from in our opinion, a textbook racial profiling stop. And what I mean is Chinedu, contrary to press statements sent out or made by the authorities, was not crossing in the middle of traffic, but was simply walking down the street. And to a particular sheriff's deputy, he looked out of place in San Mateo County, where he was doing nothing but just walking down the street. Now, in the course of a sheriff's deputy electing to find out what was going on with Chinedu, they approached him in their police car, and then he wanted to avoid contact. He was not committing any crimes at that time and crossed the street. And from there, as they say, it was on. And what I mean by that is the call went out saying that he was crossing in traffic, and that brought a number of sheriff's deputies to the scene. And as opposed to them approaching this from a situation of, this is at best a ticket, perhaps, for crossing the street for those who arrived after the racial profiling stop, it escalated quickly into a comply or die situation. And what I mean by that is Chinedu essentially was in a situation where these deputies set upon him, and they used a number of different force options against him, as opposed to trying to de-escalate a situation. Instead, it went from using batons, it went to pepper spray, it went to tasers, and ultimately a number of sheriff's deputies jumping on top of him and essentially holding him down to the ground in a manner wherein he was essentially asphyxiated to death. All the while going against their training, all the while going against their policies in the way they used their force against Chinedu. And yes, he is a large Black man. And yes, that may have fit the stereotype in terms of, for them, someone who was out of place, someone who needed to be controlled, someone who needed to be investigated to determine whether or not he was committing a crime. But none of that rose to the level of being anything legitimate towards the amount of force and ultimately his death. And in the wake of that, he leaves a family, he leaves a daughter, he leaves a mother, he leaves his sisters, a brother, and a host of community people who all knew and loved him. And for background, because forgive me, I'm just joining, Chinedu was a college graduate. He attended Morehouse College, graduated. He was a journalist in his own right. He was a very intelligent young man, a very thoughtful young man. He had been employed, and none of the typical stereotypes that people associate with those people who find themselves the victims of the police. And in a criminal injustice system, you would be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, depending upon how familiar you are with the criminal and justice complex, that there are many victims who do not fit the script, who do not fit the stereotypes that many of us are made familiar with by television shows and the nightly news programs as it relates to who they profile or who they highlight are people who are involved or get caught up in the criminal justice system. And so me being a civil rights attorney who has represented hundreds of people who find themselves or found their loved ones caught up in this maniacal system, I know all too well, additionally, as a person who used to do criminal defense, that there are a lot of victims, and many of them, they're nameless, not to their family or to the people who love them, but to the public in general, because they don't make a TV show. They don't have organized
Salen en programas de televisión o no tienen
community around them. Their names are nothing more than a hashtag, perhaps a poster, perhaps a t-shirt, but they're all important. They all deserve representation. And so when you have a district attorney's office, when they're looking at these incidents, far too many times they give police officers a pass. And frankly, until the police are charged, until they understand that when they violate the morals of the community, when they violate their oath, when they violate our public trust that we place in them to make life or death decisions within the bounds of the law, and when they make those life and death decisions, that there's consequences to them when they do it wrong, when they purposely and intentionally violate the public trust, unfortunately, this cycle will continue. And so it's very important. We can look here in the Bay Area, which gets the billing as a bastion of progressivism, a bastion of liberalism. And I will tell you, having grown up here and litigated these cases here, that is a title that is not well deserved. Because if you were to look just in the state of California, period, the entire state, one officer prior to the Oscar Grant case, which if you're familiar with, is a young man who was killed on the BART platform in the San Francisco Bay Area, which was later made into the movie Fruitville, of which I was one of the elite attorneys representing that family. Johannes Mesley was the first officer in over 101 years to be charged with murder in California. So what that means is over 101 years, there hasn't been a single district attorney out of the 52 counties in California that thought any of the hundreds, thousands of Black men, brown men, and people, period, that have been killed, they thought there were criminal charges that warranted a murder charge. And only recently are we starting to see any type of reckoning in the criminal justice system. We've seen charges brought in San Francisco, of which I'm the civil attorney on many of those cases. We've seen a single charge brought in Alameda County. But we have literally murderous police departments. You can look to the city of Vallejo. You can look to here in our state. You don't have to look at some far off place. It is not across the street, when in fact it is in our front yard and our backyard. So I implore everyone here on this call who want to stand on the right side of justice, on the right side of history, to organize, redouble your dedication and commitment to justice, and fight not just on a situation, on an incident or a case-by-case basis, but systematically to put those people in place, in power, in the district attorney's office, who have the ability, who we have entrusted with the awesome power to make decisions, to hold people accountable. We know, because the statistics show, that if these were situations involving, if it was in reverse, where it was a Black or brown man who had taken someone's life in any of these situations, the only thing that would beat them to a jail cell will be the headlights of the car they were being driven into jail. We have to reverse that trend. We have to take this seriously, and we must put people in place who are willing to do the public's business and put it over the politics and the conflicts, inherent conflicts of interest that are present in our system, where we have district attorneys who are being put in a position and are unwilling to do so as it relates to hold their friends and colleagues, the people who they go and have coffee and tea with at lunch, accountable for the death, dehumanization, and destruction of people's lives. And so with that being said, I want to make sure that the clarion call goes out, that for all the warriors of justice, you organize, you bring others in, because it's going to take everyone being involved and committed in order to change the tide and change the course of history. Once
Thank you
again, my
so
name is
much, Adante. Oh, thank you. I'm just so grateful that you were able to make time to join us on such last minute notice when we found out that Abella wasn't going to be able to make it. We have a number of just amazing speakers here, so I definitely want to get to Yoel, who's going to be giving us a quick overview of prosecutors diving in even further into the stuff that Adante was already talking about. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yoel Haile. I'm the Criminal Justice Director for the ACLU of Northern California. Thank you all for being here today. And thank you to Adante and Kate and everybody who spoke before. I think there's a couple of main points I want to highlight before passing us off to our excellent panel, which we're all looking forward to. And one is that for every cop who murders a loved one, who kills a loved one, there's a prosecutor behind them who lets them go and who justifies the homicide and who gives them legal protection to continue doing the same thing to other people. The reason why we as the ACLU, along with many of our partners throughout the state, many of whom are on this event today, decided to really
Decidieron enfocar
one of the main actors to target within the criminal legal system is that we believe they are the gatekeepers to mass incarceration and to mass deportation. That the decisions prosecutors make every single day, that the elected district attorneys allow their line prosecutors to make, are the reasons why we have jails filled with people who should really be receiving mental health support, substance use disorder support, many other social services that are so desperately needed, but are instead caged in jail cells and prison cells, are because of the charging decisions, the choices that prosecutors make every single day to charge people with really useless things, and sending people to jails and prisons as the first and sometimes only reaction to social needs and lack of social services. For every police officer that kills a loved one, there's a city council and a city mayor who approves their budget and who gives them millions and millions of dollars instead of routing those same dollars to provide housing as a human right guaranteed to all people, to provide healthcare, mental health care, and other healthcare services to the community, to provide jobs, and income and all the other things that we as human beings need. We all know that a safe community is not an over-policed community. A safe community is a community that has the needs. If you look at all the best neighborhoods people want for themselves and for their children, the first thing that comes to your mind is not even the overwhelming presence of police. But if you go to the neighborhoods where a lot of us live, the first thing you see on every corner are police cars and police officers who have failed miserably at preventing crime and who also, to a relative degree, fail at solving crime, but happen to have millions of dollars every year allocated to them by city councils and city mayors, and by the same token have millions of dollars allocated to prosecutors' offices to prosecute people for things that should not be prosecuted, or for things that the appropriate intervention would be a diversion to resources, a diversion to various social services that people needed, and the access to housing and other things. Um, and it's for this reason that we've targeted prosecutors as one of the main reasons uh, why our jails and our prisons are filled with people who pose no safety risk to the community, and whose presence in these jails and prisons is a waste of significant financial resources for the county, for the state, and for everybody involved. Um, in 2018, when it was kind of one of the first times where there were significant challenges to the incumbent who always ran on tough on crime platforms, and in the years since, we've seen some movement on the side of what we are calling progressive prosecutors, who are looking to decarcerate the system, who are looking to a lot of offenses, to not charge a lot of offenses, um, and divert people to the appropriate resources. And we've had some, I think, good success collectively on that, with the election of some progressive prosecutors who are willing to take some bold actions to protect our communities, um, and to not incriminate and incarcerate many of our folks. And we're seeing kind of the results of that. Um, and we hope that in the upcoming election in 2022, we're able to see a more seismic shift in the political ground, that allows us to make even further strides. I think the last thing I want to point out is that we're all cognizant of the contradiction that is, what is a progressive prosecutor? The function of that office is the caging of human beings by design, and that is a contradiction that we can't pretend that it's not there. It's absolutely there. But it is a contradiction that we have to grapple with continuously, um, as something that's in the space, but while also recognizing the kind of immediate material benefits and the number of people we can get out of jails and prisons, by electing people who would do things differently than the way things are being done now. So with that, I want to introduce my colleague, Anne, who's going to facilitate a conversation with our very esteemed colleagues and comrades from across the state.
Thank you, Yoel. It is such a pleasure to be here, and really appreciate everyone taking the evening to dig into these issues and start really thinking about 2022 and what we want from our elected DAs. I'm Ann Irwin. I am the Executive Director of Smart Justice California. We work to elect local and state policymakers who will champion criminal justice reform, and that includes prosecutors. We worked really hard over the last couple of years to elect DA Gascon in Los Angeles and Chesa Boudin in San Francisco. Those victories would not have happened without our partners in the field, in the community, many of whom are participating tonight. So as always, I send my love out to you. We, in 2018, almost 4 years ago, worked with a field of candidates who were really courageously standing up to challenge incumbents across California. And so we're really excited for 2022 and something akin to a rematch, loosely speaking. But tonight we're not talking about candidates. We are talking about policies, we're talking about accountability, and we're talking about what we are hoping to see out of our DAs and how they're disappointing us. I have these incredible folks here that I'm gonna poke and prod. So without further ado, I'm gonna just share their names and their organizations. For longer bios, and this is just for the sake of time, please feel free to look at our event website and you'll get to learn more about them and their work. So James King, who is campaign director for the Ella Baker Center, Vanya Quarles, executive director of Starting an Over and also an integral part of the Riverside Justice Table, and Jared Rivera, the political director, SEIU 2015, Sarah Lee, a community advocate with the Asian Law Caucus. She's also part of a number of other important coalitions. I have the benefit of being in conversation with you all, who I'm proud to call colleagues and comrades in the work. I'm going to dive in, and I think in keeping with the theme of and the focus of getting proximate, it would be helpful if each of you could share with us what brings you to this work, this focus on prosecutors, and is there a moment in your life, there may be many moments, but one that you'd want to share that really is for you, that either that aha moment or that kind of where the rubber meets the road in your life on the power of prosecutors over people's lives. And let me start with you, Vanya.
Thank you, Anne. My name is Vonia, and I am a third generation justice or injustice involved person, which means I myself had been incarcerated. My mother had been incarcerated. My grandmother had been incarcerated. And so incarceration wasn't new, but my focus on the district attorney through the ACLU and others doing work across the state, I became acutely aware of the power that the district attorney had. Prison doesn't help homelessness. It doesn't help mental health. It doesn't erase poverty. It doesn't do any of those things. And so in the county that I'm in now, it became quite apparent that we have a lot of work to do just to catch up with the rest of the state. We're not even talking about being progressive. We're just talking about being human and treating people humanely in the criminal injustice system. So that's kind of how I came to looking at the district attorney and the power. I didn't know they had all that power. I was using all my energy at police and at the collateral consequences of incarceration, but focusing on the district attorney gave me the opportunity to go to where the babies are being thrown into the water. And I use that metaphorically. And down, going upstream to where it's happening took me to the district attorney. Downstream is what we do with reentry. But what if we changed the whole need for reentry by right-sizing the district attorney, the role that the district attorney has, creating a different culture within the district attorney's office, and creating the transparency that me as a Black woman with Black children need to have to assure myself that the historic racism of the district attorney and the entire government isn't continuing to be perpetrated through the office of the district attorney. And that's it.
Thank you. Jared, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for the invite. It's great to be here. It's a shame we're not all in the same room because this is a really great group of people. And I really resonated with what Vanya just said. I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't start thinking about DAs until probably 2018, which is the first race that we got involved. I mean, growing up, I did think about cops, and mostly when I thought about cops, to be honest, I was born in the Central Valley. We moved to the Inland Empire when I was about 6 years old. And has anybody seen that movie Copland with Sylvester Stallone? Like, that's kind of what it was like. I mean, it was like my next door neighbor was a cop. There was cops all over the place. It was a typical thing where they lived in the suburbs, far away from the neighborhoods that they went into every day. My dad was not a cop, but he kind of got into this group that would go on these big camping trips. So it's like my dad, this Mexican dude and like a bunch of cops that are going camping every year. And there would just be a lot of casual racism that was just thrown around all the time, right? The type of racism you don't even realize is racist because everyone's around you is racist. And so you're able to say these things. And what I kind of put together later as I became an adult was, I didn't, they thought they were brave, and they went out and they certainly risked their lives at time, but there wasn't a whole lot of talk about justice or about defending people. What I did hear a lot of talk about was more overtime, defending your pension. I mean, these were men with high school diplomas that had boats and cars and vacations and all this stuff. It was about defending a system that had helped them a lot. So these were all things I kind of looked back on when I got older. And then the other piece is the work that I do now. So I have the extreme honor of being political director of SEIU 2015. We represent about 420,000 long-term care workers all over the state of California. The average long-term care worker in California makes about 30 grand a year. So it's low income, women of color, primarily taking care of other low income, folks all across the state. And they're all kind of caught up in the, the injustice of the criminal justice system as we, on kind of all angles of it, right? And so it's really just like my sister said, it's been kind of following, the stream, right? Just trying to get to the source of like who can actually change the system, other than just looking at the point of the arrest. So that's what's kind of got us, involved in the work. And
que nos ayudó a involucrarnos en el trabajo, trabajando con personas con Smart Justice y ACLU y otros más en los últimos años. Ha sido un camino muy, muy bueno. Así que gracias por invitarme.
Over to you, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much again also for inviting me to this panel. I feel really grateful to even hear from the other panelists too. The one thing that really brings me to this work, especially around district attorneys, came for me when Asian Law Caucus was supporting a Cambodian father who was detained by ICE, I think actually is 2018. And the only two avenues of relief from deportation was a pardon from the governor, or if the Santa Clara DA would actually put in a motion to vacate that community member's conviction. There was only two avenues for relief. And miraculously, we got a pardon from the governor. But I remember realizing how significant that DA's power and authority had over this father and how much he pushed for continued punishment, even after that father had served his time. So that really brought to light for me the power of the DAs, especially for immigrant community members, and also my work in Survived and Punished, and how domestic violence survivors who are incarcerated for their actions of their abusers or for defending themselves, they themselves are also not believed, right? And the district attorneys often are not on the side of survivors as well. So those are the two main things I would bring up, just to put it shortly, and I can share more later.
Thank you, Sarah. James.
Hey, I want to just second everyone's gratitude for being here tonight. This is, I've been moved already so many times, and just want to say that what brings me to this space and the reason I don't know if excited or eager to talk about it is the right framing, but the reason that it's important to me is because of my personal experiences and finally being at a place of privilege in my life where I can work to try to affect change when it comes to the way law enforcement has impacted me my entire life. I grew up 1980s, moved to Ferguson, Missouri, where I was quickly impacted by by police there, local police there, who, as Adante said earlier, thought I looked out of place. And my family being one of the first families of color in that community, I was often targeted and really just experienced police violence at a very, very young age. By 2004, I was living in San Diego, and I was charged with a second-degree robbery. For those who aren't familiar with the penal code, it was a robbery in which there was no weapon involved or no physical violence. However, when the district attorney, when the prosecutor discovered that I had 2 prior strikes and had been to prison once before, they were determined to sentence me to 35 years to life. They never wanted to offer me a plea deal. Instead, they determined that I would go to trial so that they could give me the maximum penalty. I lost faith in my own attorney and fired him and went in propria persona. I started to represent myself, all with the goal of just meeting the prosecutor. I felt like if I met the prosecutor, maybe we could have a conversation and I could receive some type of compassion and mercy. I did not know at the time that the prosecutor was working under a policy direction from the district attorney herself. So there was nothing the prosecutor could do or would be willing to do in my case. And so realizing at that time that until then and even beyond, DAs and prosecutors I've had very few interaction with them, but they've had an enormous impact upon my life. And realizing that these people who were so far removed from my community, so far removed from my day-to-day life, could just follow a policy direction that would result in me receiving a life sentence, seemed like a terrible, terrible waste of resources and injustice. So coming home, I was privileged to come home in December of 2019. I wanted to start working to really engage with the office of the district attorney, because I realized that at the end of the day, what seems so immutable are largely people creating and enforcing policies. And just as people can create and enforce them, other people can work to shift them and shape them. So that has been what has driven me. Those have been the personal experiences. And I would just say not just my own, but so many people that I know who have been impacted by people who are not from our community, who set policies and determine which of us are worthy of freedom, which of us are worthy to just have lives. And that has largely been what has driven me.
Thank you, James. Thank you. I mean, for everyone, it's such a reminder that the political is deeply personal. I want to circle back to you, Vanya, because in you've been such a leader around so many of the sort of ways that criminal justice system, criminal legal system impacts people's lives, and spent a lot of time focusing on reentry. But in your effort to go upstream, you arrived at and established the Riverside Justice Table. And I think it'd be really helpful to understand why the Riverside Justice Table was born and what you all are hoping to accomplish at that county level. Particularly, let me say, in context of this prosecutor work.
So thank you. And I forgot to say thank you for having me on the panel, but I really am as grateful as I can be to be here with you all tonight. I think the motivation for the Justice Table was the level of harm that's created by the public defender in our county. And we're a small organization, and we didn't have the capacity to do all that needs to be done to hold our current district attorney accountable. I mean, our district attorney leads in the number of death penalty cases. He gets 3 or 4 times as much money from the police officer unions as any other district attorney in the country. We had began meeting with him just as we were forming the Justice Table, and we were getting no traction. And no matter what the people in our county voted to support, whether it was 47, 57, 64, all the reform efforts, he seemed to have his own agenda. And so it was ACLU, Southern California, Sigma Beta Xi, Starting Over, the organization I work for. I believe CURB was at the table, and there were ICUC and other organizations who wanted to focus, but individually we didn't have the capacity to. So we found that convening the table allowed us to come in deeper and heavier with more resources than just what one organization had. Our county is huge, and the district attorney and the sheriffs run our county. They run our supervisors, they run our city councils, and we have to change that. So it feels like David and Goliath, but I believe in David and Goliath. So we're not going anywhere. We're becoming stronger. We're educating ourselves. We're working with community, and we found that the Justice Table allowed us to go deeper in the district attorney accountability work.
Thank you.
I hope I answered it.
You did. And I want to say, and I'm happy to call you as often as possible to remind you that in those moments, sometimes we win. So keep fighting. Jared, on that note, I want to turn it over to you and ask, 2015 SEIU 2015 has really stepped up on partnering with this movement and being a part of this movement to really do transformational change within the criminal legal system. And we worked really closely last year on the LADA race. And one of the things you touched on earlier, but just to dig in a little deeper on what is it about your members and their daily life that makes this issue, prosecutors, so poignant? And then also I want to touch on, you talked about some of the financial motivations at play in the criminal legal system, specifically with police. But can you share kind of a report from the ground in LA about how DA Gascon's, really the bold policies that he announced on day one, how that is reverberating both among our allies, but then among the law enforcement community, including deputies in his office? I know that was a lot I asked you, so feel free to pick and choose.
That was a multi-part question. I will do my best to answer. Yeah, I mean, the race last year with Gascon was an amazing thing. I thought up until the day of the election that we were going to lose. I had no doubt in my mind that was going to be, and we overperformed polling, and it was an amazing thing. I mean, we unseated an incumbent, which is tough to do in a place as big as LA County. I think as a starting point, whenever I talk about our members and their involvement in politics, I always want to remind folks about how we're able to engage. So we represent, hundreds of thousands of low-income folks. Every dollar that we spend in the political arena is a voluntary contribution that our members make above and beyond their dues. We don't use dues money. We use something called COPE money. The average contribution is $10 a month. So it's tens of thousands of low-income folks that put their money together. They're involved in every endorsement that we make. And so, people talk about unions like a special interest, and I always want to let folks know, it's our members who have made this decision. We collectively, I would argue, the largest grassroots political funder of low-income folks anywhere in the country, and so we take that responsibility really seriously. And like I said, kind of in the opening, I think that the journey that I would say that I've been on is the same one that our members have been on. They just want, fewer of their folks going to jail. They just want, a system. They want money to go into job, and they want more jobs in their neighborhoods. They want better schools. They want, better housing, all the things that we all want. And they don't want all that money being eaten up by the criminal justice system, And so I think it's been a conversation that we've been kind of having together about why DAs matter so much. It was a new conversation. And, I know that when we had our endorsement meeting with George, there was a lot of skepticism, right? I had met him, I think, at a Democratic Party convention like a year before, and I'm not often impressed by politicians, but he was impressive. He was a really the vision that he had was compelling. I was there with the president of our local, April Verrett, and we completely went into that lunch expecting to be very polite and turn away and say, we're not going to get involved in this race. It's an incumbent, we're not going to win. And he made the case, and we had kind of no choice but to get involved. And then we put him in front of our members and they grilled him. They really grilled him, because they're kind of asking are you going to do anything different? Is this really going to matter? And he made the case. And so anytime you can go up against police unions, anytime you can go up against millions and millions of dollars on the other side, and you can unseat an incumbent, it scares people, it shakes things up, and it causes a reaction. And that's what we're seeing now. I mean, I have to say, I was prepared for a reaction, but I think I was even a little naive about the force that would come. I mean, they started talking similar to what they're doing in San Francisco, but they started talking about a recall effort before legally they were able to collect the first signature on a recall. I mean, they were talking about it like 2 months after he'd been in an election. It's similar to what folks were trying to do at the national level. They were trying to pretend like an election didn't happen, right? He won. There were two very, very different visions, moving forward between him and Jackie Lacey. It wasn't a particularly close election, and they're trying to undo it. And I mean, the things that he's looking to do about diverting first-time offenders into different programs, his efforts to try to end the cash bail system, about not charging kids as adults. These are major things. And so I think the lessons that we're learning right now, and we're in the fight right now, is it's one thing to win an election, but we have to be prepared on the other side of it to defend that vision above and beyond him as a person, or that him as an elected official, about the vision that's being put forward. And it's really easy to win that election and go on to the next thing, because we got to pass a state budget, we're trying to pass federal legislation, there's we're looking ahead to 2022, but there are forces in his office, and there are forces in the cop unions that are waking up every single day thinking about nothing but how to sabotage this vision. And so we have a pretty broad coalition that we're pulling together, and we want to get all hands on deck, because we're not going to let the victory that we had be sabotaged by folks who want to pretend like it didn't happen. So we're in the middle of it right now. It's a fight we have to win, but we're really excited about the people that we're working with.
Thank you, Jared. And I just want to say, and let me plug, that you and the other folks from 2015 have really modeled that sticking around after an election to do the support and scaffolding work. And we are in the middle of it in LA. That's exactly right. Sarah, I want to talk, if I can ask you to go a little bit deeper on something you talked about earlier, and I'll call it the sort of arrest to deportation pipeline, as folks call it. And I think what would be helpful is what would like a courageous partner DA do with respect to immigration and folks who are passing through the system, coming in and out of courtrooms, for whom what happens in that courtroom has those profound life implications around immigration. What are you hoping to see from elected prosecutors?
Thanks, and first I can share about what is the arrest to deportation pipeline for those who may not be as familiar. So for people who are not citizens, pleading guilty to certain offenses can lead not only to incarceration, but deportation upon completing their sentences. This is oftentimes called double punishment. This can happen also very automatically, what we call ICE transfers, because once a community member completes their time or has been found suitable for parole, that local jail, that sheriff, or our state prison system can hand that community member automatically to ICE. And this is happening live here in California. In the Bay Area, San Mateo County has transferred over 100 community members to ICE since 2018. And I also want to just mention, that about 60 to 70% of people who are currently in ICE detention have come through this arrest to deportation pipeline. And that's huge, right? So just a quick plug for the Vision Act, AB 937 is trying to stop these ICE transfers. And I'll put in a link in a second to how you can stay in touch with the Vision Act, which just passed the Assembly this past week, which is huge. So back to Anne's question about what can DAs do. First, there are preventative actions the DA can take. DAs can consult with immigration attorneys to advise as to which criminal charges and plea bargains are, quote, deportation safe. I believe this is an ongoing practice in at least Chesa Boudin's office and probably in other DA's offices as well. Another option is the DA, for a community member who has actually been arrested by ICE, the DA can also participate in what you call post-conviction relief. Basically, the DA can put a motion in front of a judge to vacate that community member's past conviction. And the reasoning behind this is based on in the past, if that immigrant community member was not informed about the immigration consequences, or they were not given the alternatives very clearly, they can go back to that case, or they can also look at new evidence. And so that's kind of exactly the situation of the community member, that father that I talked about earlier. That's kind of another way, post-conviction relief, that can help someone get out of ICE detention. So there's a preventative way, and there's a way for immigrants once they are actually incarcerated by ICE. I actually want to share one action step that you all can take today. There's a 50-year-old father and grandfather who's currently detained in ICE detention. He spent 15 months in state prison, incarcerated during a mental health crisis, but then has been in ICE detention for almost 4 years now. His name is Don Juvenal, and his exact situation is what I just shared. The San Bernardino District Attorney can vacate his conviction so that he can be released from ICE. He's one of the less than 10 people currently in Yuba County Jail detained by ICE. So I'm gonna put information in the chat for how you can get involved with the Vision Act, but also to help a very live case to call the District Attorney in San Bernardino to help get Don Juvenal released. So I'm going to put that in the chat in a moment. But yeah, that's all I'll share for now.
Thank you so much, Sarah. James, you live and work in Alameda County, and Ella Baker Center's been part of a really mighty coalition that's been doing a lot of the DA accountability work there with DA O'Malley. And we've now 2022 looks very different for you all. After facing a progressive challenger in 2018, DA O'Malley, we didn't know whether she was going to come back feeling emboldened. She's sort of been herself over the years, and then announced very recently that she's not running again. So we'll have an open seat in Alameda County. Can you talk a little bit about what the 2018 election, what kind of opportunity you all are seeing that being, what you're hoping will come from that election, and then without talking about any specific candidates, just what policies you hope will be birthed after that election. And then what does the work look like for you all at Ella Baker Center with your partners in the DA accountability work that you're doing?
I think that, like to Jared's point earlier, like elections are really an exciting time to first and foremost educate the general public about the role of district attorneys, the power and influence they have, and the impact that they have upon all of us. Like there's not a person in America who's not impacted by the legal system. It's either upholding your privilege or it's destabilizing your community and causing harm. And so this role being that central linchpin, to have that general education campaign so that people know just the impact that comes from it. I think it's an opportunity to identify candidates who have a passion for building policies inclusively with the community. For so long, we've had to drag politicians and political public servants like district attorneys kicking and screaming into accountability groups and holding them accountable. Someone mentioned earlier, surprise at knowing that they were publicly elected officials. I think sometimes they're surprised to know that as well, or at least they act as if they are. So identifying candidates who approach public service with humility and really are invested in building policies in inclusion with the community. I think that it's really important that we also have a conversation about the role of incarceration and how it destabilizes communities. And I see this election as an important part of that conversation. Um, as we look at the role of district attorney, how it can evolve, and start to think about other tools that are nominally in their tool belt that thus far they have not um, felt incentivized to use. How can we as the voting public incentivize them to use their resources and their influence to create more alternatives, to create more diversion, to pour resources into preventing harmful acts as opposed to criminalizing acts that or enforcing punitive laws about criminalized acts. Finally, I'd say it's this upcoming election is a chance to reimagine safety in a world that we now exist in, one in which we realize that prisons, jails, and congregate settings are much more punitive than we ever imagined, and much more a threat to public health and public safety than we ever imagined them to be when we merely looked at incarceration through a moral lens. Now we know that it's actually a public health crisis every time you have a one of these large, overcrowded congregate settings in our midst. Then going back to the second part of your question, I think for us as the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, our real goal is to work with the community to decrease the impact and power of district attorneys within our communities. We want to see the power and influence that comes from the legal system upholding the status quo and upholding the system in order to instead see those resources diverted into preventing people from falling into the system. We were part of a recent town hall that you highlighted, and in which partnered with the ACLU, Urban Peace Movement, and other coalition members, got together with the community, and they had some really reasonable requests of DA O'Malley. For instance, don't send people for so-called low-level offenses to jail. You know, as I could say from personal experience, it's very hard. Like once you get into the system, it's very hard to get out. 2021, I mentioned earlier that I came into the system in 2004. I'm still not out because I'm on parole. So to understand that every opportunity we have to divert someone is important. Secondly, not to charge youth and our children as adults, to understand the science that people age and do not actually reach a mature brain until the age of 25. To develop a bail policy that does not punish someone who has not been determined to be guilty and also does not criminalize poverty. And finally, the final thing that they asked of the district attorney was to not just have a blanket policy to oppose people seeking parole. Right now, currently, the way our law reads, that if you are sentenced to an indeterminate sentence, then one of the criteria for your release are you a current risk to public safety? Throughout our state, district attorneys and prosecutors show up, even though they've had no interaction with the person who was incarcerated, often for decades, to oppose. And it's just a blanket policy because they're invested, as Jared mentioned earlier, in keeping the status quo and keeping the system that is benefiting them so strongly. One final thing that I'll point out is at the beginning of our discussion today, or at the beginning of the panel, or before the panel, it was mentioned how few DAs and prosecutors actually go after police brutality and police murders. But one thing that 44 district attorneys did do in the last month or so was they filed a writ opposing the new credit regulations from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, because it slightly increase people's credit earning or time off. So 44 district attorneys got together to oppose people's potential for release, potential to get to the parole board sooner. So we want to look at the fact that district attorneys not only set policy, they also assert tremendous political influence. And what can we do to bring attention to that and destabilize it and minimize their influence in our legal system?
Thank you, James. We are out of time, although I feel like I could spend days poking and prodding you for. Thank you so much for the work that you all do. It is hard work and we depend on you, so thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Ophelia to introduce Ariana.
Thank you so much, Anne. Okay, thank you so much, Anne. And thank you, Irene and Oniza. Thank you to all of the amazing panelists. I wish we had all day, but I'm here to introduce you to our amazing next speaker. My name is Ophelia, and I am introducing, and we'll pass it along shortly, to an amazing young poet from San Francisco, Ariana Vargas. I simply cannot do her justice, but I will in a brief introduction that I'm giving her right now, but I can say Ariana's track record of work in community is extraordinarily impressive. Just as powerful as her work is her poetry and her words that have left a mark on me, and I think you will see provides a sort of catharsis that I hope you all enjoy right now as well, following all of that great information and thought-provoking information we just received. So without further ado, Ariana, over to you.
Thank you so much for such a beautiful introduction, Ophelia. I really appreciate it. And thank you for allowing me to be in this space with all these amazing organizers and folks. So I will now go into my poem. I hope y'all can hear me. Okay, cool. So, Yo soy de la misión. I am from the mission. A young girl who grew up dodging bullets from gangs. I remember my mom always telling me to not kick it on 20th and Lexington. The first corner, I saw someone get shot. Now I see techies lined up for ice cream. On the same corner, I first faced death. I was 4. Fast forward to almost 20 years later, and I'm still scared of guns. Only this time, I'm scared of the gang that wears all blue. No, not your Sureño gangs, but the pigs who murdered my friend. What's his name? Sean Monterosa. Say his name, Sean Monterosa. They took my friend at 22 years old. They painted the picture in the news media, but they didn't know him. If you really knew Sean, you'd know he was shy. He was always sweet, checking in on me in the hallways anytime I was dealing with boy drama. He was always helping me clean after I had a kickback at my house. We watched the Niners Super Bowl at my house the first time we lost. We went to prom together as homies because he was too young to go to junior prom. So we had to sneak him in as my fake date. But the media doesn't know this. La comunidad that raised you does. The cops are supposed to protect and serve, but who? Not us. They say this is a broken system, but I think it's doing exactly what it's meant to do. They don't want us SF kids to survive. They don't want to see us strive. But our programs in the community continuously educate us SF kids. They protect us. They protect us more than people in the blue uniforms. Youth programs saved me. Youth programs saved Sean. But the murderers in blue took you from us. What are we supposed to do? To tell our kids to do? Even if when you got your hands up, you still get killed. Sean, although you were taken from us, you're still flying like the toucan bird you always been. You're pushing us to continue to fight for justice for you and your family and everyone else who's been taken from us unjustly. Say her name, Breonna Taylor. Say his name, George Floyd. Say her name, Vanessa Guillen. Say your name, Sean Monterosa. Your sister, Ashley, and Michelle, they're the strongest guerreras I ever seen. The fight will continue to forever grow because you deserve to be here. La Comunidad taught you to educate yourself and read politically conscious books. Your last text was to your sisters, asking them to sign a petition for George Floyd. Although they paint you a certain way, you always had bars as a graffiti artist. So you're painting your own canvas of yourself as the real person you always were, loving, caring, and above all, one of the most honorable young men I knew. Even though you ain't here, the presence you had is forever in our hearts. Thank you, Comunidad, for uplifting us youth as we mourn, heal, and grow. Thank you, Sean, for continuing to be a light that pushes us forward for change. As we continue to heal, let's remember the seeds our elders have planted with us, to find beauty in the present moment, to carry our loved ones in our hearts in everything we do. We do things different in the Bay. So wherever your heart takes you, bring that hyphy energy in how you organize, and how you teach, and how you learn. Bay Area Comunidad, this is a love letter to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ariana. That was so powerful and just so beautiful. We've obviously run a little bit over time since, given our original schedule, but there's been so much amazing words and wisdom here that I hope that everyone's sort of been able to walk away with something, really valuable here. What we plan to do now is we're going to go through some different action items that anyone, can take here to stay engaged in these DA races. And then if you want to stay, completely optional, obviously, after this event, we will still have breakout rooms, again, just so you can sort of connect with folks who are in your local region about further, efforts that are going on. But again, we obviously only ask for your time till 6:30, and we want to honor that. And with that, so, just again, and all of this will be included in your follow-up emails. Everyone who registered for this event will receive a follow-up email. But yeah, some of the action items that we have here for your consideration include signing up for ACLU's Meet Your DA newsletter, following ACLU on Twitter and Facebook. They have a Meet Your DA Twitter account, posting an infographic from Meet Your DA on your social media. And again, we'll include links to all of these things in the follow-up email. Make sure you find out who's running for DA in your county. And there's a bunch of amazing local coalitions and counties across the state that are doing DA accountability work. In the follow-up email that I will be sending out, you'll be able to click on a link and you'll see contact information for different local coalitions across the state. Again, feel free to reach out to them and see how you can volunteer or participate in their meetings, or start your own coalition. Obviously, that's always an option. One thing we're always trying to do is reach out to more people and make sure that that we're not all just talking to each other and talking to others who also should be caring about these issues. And so, feel free to invite speakers to your book clubs, to your neighborhood association meetings. We want to make sure and reach far and wide and make sure everybody knows that these DA elections really matter and why they're so important. We'll also include in the follow-up email a link to the Community Justice Platform, which is an amazing website that ACLU put together, where you can put together things that you care about. Like if you care about the environment, if you care about young people, if you care about immigration, there'll be specific things that you can add to your platform to say, like, this is the type of DA that I want to represent my county. And then, for those of you who are sort of really in this work and committed, we encourage you to also consider hosting a candidate forum in your regions, again, just to make sure that voters are educated and know where the candidates stand. And these are all things that everyone can do, on a purely nonpartisan basis. I want to just bring up Yoel. Do you have anything that you want to add here before we close out?
No, I think you got it all.
Okay. So again, we invite you, if you want to stay, we will have breakout rooms after this event. If you want to, sort of just talk to folks in your own region about sort of how to stay engaged. There are different folks who've been asked to stay a little bit longer to help facilitate those breakouts with you. And there will also be a follow-up email as well. And then just a quick plug for a couple things that are coming up. For folks in San Mateo County, there's going to be a BLM rally on on June 12th. We'll send information about that to everybody again over email. And there's also another event in our series here in San Mateo County. This is the second event that we've held in this 3-part series. The third event is going to be focusing on alternatives to policing, and that will take place on June 21st. Shara is putting information about the June 12th rally in the chat box. So with that, thank you so much, everybody, for your time. It's been so wonderful to see all of your faces. And again, want to make sure and thank everybody on our planning committee, all our speakers, all our sponsors. And thank you all. Have a great evening.